The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Alain Berset, President of the Swiss Confederation. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Alain Berset, President of the Swiss Confederation, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great privilege for me to stand here before you today in New York. We are gathered here because of those who, after the tragedy of the Second World War, believed that an international order based on rules and dialogue, rather than just on the relationships of power, would lead us to peace and prosperity. They were right, because given the challenges and transformations we face in the world today, no person and no country has the capacity to stand alone. I'm thinking about globalization, inequality, war, internal conflict. Also, I'm thinking about extremism, migration flows, climate change, health crisis, the digital revolution. It is our shared responsibility, the responsibility of each and every member of the United Nations, to ensure that international institutions and organizations are up to the task of supporting us in this endeavor. Unfortunately, there seems to be a tendency now to seek answers to these problems in nationalist isolation and growing mistrust with regard to cooperation between states. A new international order is taking shape with new actors and a new middle class. Between 1990 and 2015, in a single generation, the number of people affected by extreme poverty fell from 2 billion to 700 million. This is according to World Bank figures, and that is indeed exceptional. But what is of great concern to us today is that these changes go hand in hand with an erosion of the international system founded on the rule of law. We are, I believe, witnessing a real crisis in multilateralism. Paradoxically, just when we are trying to forge the main pillars of the global governance of the future. As a country that is interconnected and open to the world, Switzerland is aware of the value of a working international legal order based on exchange and multi-stakeholder dialogue. Such an order guarantees stability and is consistent with Swiss values as set out in our Constitution. Your Excellencies, there are many crises in many parts of the world. Some of them have been going on for a very long time. I think in particular of the Middle East, where re-engaging in dialogue is the only option. Switzerland is working for a just and lasting peace between Israelis and Palestinians, based on a negotiated two-state solution in compliance with international law and Security Council resolutions. In Syria, the conflict has now entered its 8th year with no real end in sight. The basic rules and principles of international humanitarian law and human rights law are not being respected. In recent months, the conflict has intensified on various fronts. In Syria, over 13 million men, women and children depend on humanitarian aid. It is essential we try harder to find a political solution to the conflict. Only a negotiated solution, including all sectors of Syrian society, can guarantee lasting peace and sustainable reconstruction in Syria and the region. And in Yemen, the conflict has been going on for years. Millions of people have no water, food or medical care because of the armed conflict. Switzerland calls on all parties to cease hostilities and come to the negotiating table to seek solutions as to how to end this humanitarian crisis. Switzerland remains ready and willing to play its part. For example, we could host peace talks in Geneva under the auspices of the United Nations. Large-scale health crises accompany all of these conflicts. The spread of disease, particularly in war zones and refugee camps, is a major burden on health systems that are already weakened or ruined. It is vital to protect healthcare facilities and personnel so as to maintain working health systems and access to medical care.
Excellences, l'ONU.
Your Excellencies, the United Nations is the very cornerstone of peaceful coexistence among all states, in accordance with the rules that we together have set down. The United Nations is indispensable and indeed ideally placed to tackle contemporary challenges, especially the fight against inequality. But to do this, the United Nations must be strong. If it wants to have a maximum impact with the means available to it, it must adapt to an ever-changing environment and constantly reconsider its working methods. And therefore, Switzerland is an active supporter of the reform programs launched by the Secretary General Antonio Guterres. These reforms in peace and security, development and management seek to ensure the relevance and effectiveness of the United Nations in the face of current global challenges. I want to focus on the following points. First, sustainable development goals. Switzerland is working actively towards implementation of the 2030 Agenda and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We have been working on a robust monitoring mechanism, providing for voluntary national reviews and reporting on progress towards the goals. And with other countries, we've been helping to provide better statistical data. We have innovative projects in healthcare, education, energy, and innovation. But efforts need to be made to combat global warming and the negative environmental impacts of economic development. Might I take this opportunity to stress the essential contribution that is made by culture and cultural diversity in building a sustainable and successful society. A culture enables and stimulates economic, social, and environmental sustainability, and culture must occupy a central place in development policies. In January in Davos, we highlighted culture's essential contribution to our lives, and we highlighted the importance of a high-quality environment for it. Secondly, I would like to draw attention to the Human Rights Council and the International Criminal Court. Respect for human dignity and fundamental rights is not optional. It is a clear necessity for any stable and sustainable development. Switzerland strongly supports the work of the Human Rights Council and that of the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, both based in Geneva. so that they can do their duty to strengthen, promote and protect human rights throughout the world. International cooperation is also essential to preventing conflict and establishing a framework for lasting peace. I would like to mention in particular the fight against impunity. 20 years ago, Switzerland worked for the adoption of the Rome Statute and the creation of the International Criminal Court. We will continue to support this unique international cooperative effort to help the victims of the most serious crimes. Then thirdly, may I talk about Geneva and Switzerland's good offices. We want to continue to build bridges to support negotiations and mediations. We want to continue using the diplomacy of our good offices to help countries and international and regional organizations to find solutions to conflicts and to make progress on issues and to thinking about new issues. In Geneva, we are doing everything to ensure that discreet peace talks can be held, for example, of the kind undertaken by parties to the conflicts in Syria or Yemen. Geneva is also home to several United Nations agencies, the World Health Organization, the International Labour Organization, and many other international organizations. Geneva can therefore serve as a platform for dialogue on new challenges at the interface between politics, society, innovation, science, and economy. I'm also thinking about internet governance and digitalization. These topics increasingly require synergies and dialogue between the traditional spheres of international action. But what we can do does not just involve Geneva. We also contributed to the Global Compact on Migration, and we are grateful for the trust that was placed in Switzerland. The management of migration flows at the global level is an enormous undertaking, which requires participation by all relevant stakeholders. Your Excellencies, policies relying on trade protectionism and selfish interests are enjoying a certain kind of popularity today. They would like us to believe that the world is a zero-sum game, that there are no winners without losers. But today, as in the past, withdrawal, protectionism, threats, violence, none of that will provide any answer to the dysfunctions and disparities of the world we live in. Worse still, such policy will lead to a drop in trade and ultimately a decline in prosperity. Such a policy increases mistrust, isolation. It obstructs the sharing of ideas and innovations, and our world would be all the poorer, both spiritually and culturally. We would be able to draw on fewer ideas to face future challenges. We would not benefit from each other's successes. The current malaise is a warning to us that we must do our utmost to prevent a world in which people only look out for themselves. Rather, we must do our utmost to encourage a world of cooperation between states, where we strive for the common weal, for causes such as peace, sustainable development, environmental protection. We can deal with the challenges and sources of growing inequality, demographic change and migration only if we tackle them in a spirit of mutual trust. All states will be winners if they see others as potential partners instead of competitors. All states are stronger if the international situation is more stable. Your Excellencies, the world is not a zero-sum game. It is a positive-sum game. Thank you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency Alain Berset, President of the Swiss Confederation, for the statement just made. May I request representative to remain seated while we greet the head of state.